I'm delighted to introduce Professor Geoffroy, who's an internationally recognized specialist in Islamic spirituality. He teaches Islamic studies at the University of Strasbourg, as well as other institutions such as the Catholic University of Louvain, the Open University of Catalonia, and Emirate Network. He's president of the newly founded international foundation Sufi Conscience, which is very interesting. If you speak French, you can look it up online. And he's a member of several international think tanks and research groups. He works on a broad scope of issues of spirituality in the modern world, such as ecology, globalization, and interfaith dialogue, besides acting as scientific and editorial advisor on Islam for various journals. He's a columnist for the magazine Ultreya and writes regularly for Le Monde's monthly magazine on religion. Besides contributing numerous articles to the Encyclopedia of Islam, he's the author of over a dozen books, several of which have been translated into different languages. Into English, we have this excellent introduction to Sufism, and he spoke at the Ibn Arabi Society Symposium in Oxford in 2012 on spiritual realization through daily awakening, and this has been published in the Ibn Arabi Society's journal, the Journal of the Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi Society, volume 53, if you'd like to read that in English. So we're delighted to welcome you, Professor Geoffroy, and today the talk is entitled Some Aspects of Supra-reason in Ibn Arabi's Epistemology. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to beg your pardon for my very bad French accent in English, but I think you are used to hear strangers speaking English, so no problem, I hope. So, and usually in French, I don't like to read my paper, but in English, I'm obliged. I'm ma'akul, you know. We will speak about al-aql, and I'm ma'akul with my text. I'm shackled with my text. But I think we can have a nice presence as well. The fact that human reason is utterly limited in its perception of spiritual reality and cannot grasp sound knowledge of it was already a common topic before Ibn Arabi, of course. One of the major themes in Sufi epistemology, and perhaps the most important one, is that reality cannot be reduced to sensory appearances or human mental constructions. It's preliminary methodologic point for the Sufis. It's due to the assessments that the spiritual crisis of Al-Ghazali, amongst others, but Al-Ghazali is a very important figure in this field, is due to this assessment that the crisis of Al-Ghazali began. You know, during 6 months, about. A central scriptural archetype concerning this topic, this subject, is a Quranic episode, of course, of the encounter of the prophet Moses with the enigmatic initiator of the prophet and of the saints, Al-Khidr or Al-Khadir, the Quran. I will speak after again about this. At its own expense, you know, Moses, the prophet of formal, of human law, experiences that there is a supra-rational, supra-normative reality which he does not accept due to a lack of spiritual endurance, a sabr. In this episode, in the Quran, in Surah Al-Kahf, the cave, several times, Al-Khidr tells him, you won't have sabr. This Quranic passage, much celebrated by the spiritual masters of Islam, actually establishes the superiority of knowledge. Ibn Arabi says, knowledge that comes directly from God, al-ilm al-laduni, I will speak again about this, that is knowledge bestowed by divine grace, al-ilm al-wahbi, over the superiority of this science, of this modality of knowledge, over the mental and rational knowledge, which is acquired through individual human effort, al-ilm al-kasbi. We have in mind the address of Abu Yazid Bistami, the great Abu Yazid Bistami, to the literalist scholars of his time, and this is much quoted by Ibn Arabi. You have taken your knowledge like a dead person, receiving it from another dead person, yani from professor to professor, so from mayyit to mayyit. But we have taken our knowledge from the living one who never dies. It's obvious that Sufis do not reject discursive reason and dialectical thought on which the exoteric Islamic sciences, ilm al-kalam, al-falsafa, al-fiqh, are based. But they use them as a springboard, explaining that the word aql, aqala, means reason or mind, but also, and formally, firstly, means shackle, bind. Human reason is a divine gift, no shak, as many verses of the Quran point out, but it can only produce mental conjecture, a dhan in the Quran, a dhan which some Quranic verses stigmatize. The faculty of reflection is something created. So how could it be a sufficient means to know the Creator? Abu Hassan Shazili, amongst others, on school of the Shazilia, Ibn Arabi, also focused on this point. Knowledge is something created. So you won't know God through knowledge, but through God, or by God, from God, to God. According to the well-known Sufi expression, spiritual knowledge remains beyond the stage of reason. Ma wara tawar al-aql. This expression is like a leitmotif in Sufi writings, beyond the stage of reason. It's considered as more open and more fulfilling than knowledge obtained only by the intellect, rational consideration or investigation, and nazar. Since spiritual knowledge encompasses both a rational and a supra-rational dimension. It's said to be reached through ilham. Very many Sufi writers come back on these expressions, and even Emir Abdel Qadir in the 19th century insists on these two ways, methodology, al-ilham, inspiration, and al-kashf, unveiling. In the eyes of the Sufis, these connective methods are those most likely to lead to the vision of certainty, al-yaqeen, and the direct perception of spiritual realities, al-ayan, which evaporates the doubt associated with the speculative sciences. Radically rational or speculative sciences, even Islamic and religious sciences, are not able to produce a true vision of reality. Now, some shared perspective between Al-Ghazali and Ibn Arabi. In the field of Sufi epistemology concerned with the relation between reason and supra-reason, the presence of Al-Ghazali who Ibn Arabi often calls one of our companions. And also, he calls him elsewhere, the spokesman for the people of this path. So the presence of Al-Ghazali, it's obvious. It had been said before. Do we need to speak of the direct influence of the letter on Sheikh Al-Akbar? Anyway, Al-Ghazali opens his monumental revival of religious sciences, Ihya Ulumuddin, with an epistemological introductory book of knowledge, Kitab al-Ilm, in which he clearly establishes the preeminence of spiritual unveiling, al-mukashafa, that is, in his term also, esoteric knowledge, al-ilm al-batin, over preeminence over exoteric, horizontal, I would say, horizontal knowledge, that is the science of human relations, in these terms, al-mu'amala. It's to be found in Kitab al-Ilm, at the beginning of Ihya Ulumuddin. He consequently criticizes scholastic theology, Ilm al-Kalam, which is, I quote him, which is neither able to be open to the knowledge of God, nor to provide the fruits of the science of unveiling. On the contrary, it is a veil thrown over this knowledge. And we have in mind that Al-Ghazali was formerly a great theologian. But after his spiritual crisis, he realized that it was a mere illusion, or it could stay at the stage of illusion, if not illuminated by something else more deeper, more inner. In the same way, Ibn Arabi begins, as you may know, his Meccan illuminations, al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, with a classification. It has been alluded to this before. Classification of 3 levels of knowledge. 1, the science of reason, Ilm al-Aql. It's a science, Ilm al-Aql. 2, the science of spiritual states, Ilm al-Ahwal. And 3, the science of divine secrets, Ilm al-Asrar, which, he reminds us, is beyond the stage of reason. And from the very beginning, he minimizes the degree of knowledge any theologian, mutakallim, or anyone who relies on mental inquiry and proofs can obtain. From the very beginning of the Futuhat. Just like Al-Ghazali, Ibn Arabi strongly disapproves of the use of theological and philosophical reflection, and he even forbids it altogether. So we have many opinions, or many faces of Ibn Arabi's opinion on the theologian and al-falasifa, but in some context he forbids the regard and the seek in this field. Occupying oneself with such concern is indeed an obstruction on the path of God. And although he criticizes Al-Ghazali for having entered into the arena of such a reflection through his refutation of the philosopher in his book Tahafut al-Falasifa, he quotes him at length to support his argument against the theologians who claim to weigh God with their human scales. These theologians fail to recognize that God, Ibn Arabi said, that God gave them these scales only to weigh them for God, not to weigh God himself. Concerning philosophers, Sheikh Al-Akbar perhaps goes further than Al-Ghazali in his criticism by reminding us that philosophy means love of wisdom, which is the knowledge of prophecy. You know, the old debate before Ibn Arabi between philosophy and revelation. Revelation brought to humanity by the prophets. But philosophers, I quote him, have made mistakes in the knowledge of God that contradict what the messengers brought. They did this by judging through consideration on the basis of their corrupt reflection concerning the origin of prophecy and messengerhood. You know, the gap is between is in the perception of the philosophers of the role of the prophets in humanity. Finally, in a long imaginal vision, Ibn Arabi states that all the rational sciences which philosophers and theologians practice are nothing more than destructive knowledges. Ulum muhlika, destructive knowledges. Amongst the other signs of the influence of Al-Ghazali in the dialectics between reason and supra-reason, there is a preeminence of unveiling over inspiration, preeminence of kashf or mukashafa over ilham. Al-Ghazali has undoubtedly established the former as the spiritual cognitive method, kashf. As an exacting discipline, he sometimes calls mujahadat al-kashf, striving towards unveiling. And for Ibn Arabi too, unveiling is the best method to go beyond limited reason. He gives this term a whole palette of meanings according to the adjective or the annexed term which accompanied it. Al-kashf sud, al-kashf kaza, al-kashf al-wujudi, al-kashf, and so on. Ibn Arabi's main point on this topic is to be found in the following passage. Sound knowledge is not given by reflection, nor by what the rational thinkers establish by means of their reflective powers. Sound knowledge is only that which God throws into the heart of the knower. It's a divine light for which God singles out any of his servants whom he will, whether angel, messenger, prophet, saint, or simple believer. He concludes with this axial and seminal phrase, and he who has no unveiling has no knowledge at all. Man la kashf lahu, fala ilma lahu. He who has no unveiling has no knowledge at all. And if we think about the hyper-modern, I would say, sciences, like, of course, quantum physics, were in this epistemological field. He adds later on in the Futuhat that any knowledge which does not come from spiritual taste, a dhawq, is not the knowledge of the people of God. So it's not a real knowledge. Dhawq. You know the well-known aphorism of the Sufi sentence, Man dhaka araf. Only who taste knows. There is no knowledge without testing. Inner testing, something subtle, of course. Elsewhere, Ibn Arabi observes the same two parts, the distinction concerning the essence of knowledge as Al-Ghazali did. He said, two ways lead to knowledge of God. There is no third way. The first way is a way of unveiling. It's an incontrovertible knowledge, which is actualized through unveiling on which man finds in himself. The second way is the way of reflection on reasoning, istidlal, through rational demonstration, al-burhan al-aqli. This way is lower than the first one, since he who bases his consideration upon proof, mental proof, can be visited by obfuscation, something and touch with a doubt, which detract from his proof, and only with difficulty can he remove them. Al-Ghazali and Ibn Arabi also share a common vision of the rooting of sanctity, of spiritual knowledge, and of supra-reason in prophecy. And here, of course, arises the deep debate about the hadith, al-ulama warathat al-anbiya. Al-ulama are the heirs of the prophets. Which kind of knowledge, ilm, is involved here? It has been really a very strong debate along the centuries between the exoteric scholars and the esoteric knowers or the Sufis. When Al-Ghazali tackles the subject of the holy prophetic spirit in his book Mishkat al-Anwar, The Niche of Lights, he asserts that it is the property of prophets and of some saints. In it are revealed the dispositions of the unseen and the statutes of the other world, which the mental and discursive faculties cannot compass. So there is a dimension beyond reason to which the latter has no access. Al-Ghazali. Ibn Arabi, for his part, after reminding us that all the prophecies are bestowed sciences, gathers the prophets and the saints under the banner of their sciences, which are beyond the stage of reason. And no wonder that for him, the people of God, that is to say, the Sufis, are the real heirs of the prophets. Now, of course, some specificities of Ibn Arabi in this topic. Sheikh al-Akbar, of course, adds his own genius into the consideration of the dialectics between reason and supra-reason, as we will show through some examples. Firstly, but not the least, is terminology. For people who work a lot of a few Ibn Arabi's work, you know that his terminology is plunge you in hayra, in something in great perplexity sometimes. So I will just make an allusion to his terminology by the star-spangled diffusion. It's mainly the case that in Arabi not only confirms and develops, but also transposes in his very own manner, very personal manner, what has previously been said or written by his predecessors. His works prefigure what contemporary thinkers call the complexity of life. In France, we have Edgar Morin, for instance, but it's a paradigm, you know. I'd like to say that it's an old, of course, paradigm, but reactualized nowadays by the discovery of the infinitude of life, complexity of life. Indeed, his inspired ways of consciousness and thought have substantially enriched the matrix of Sufi doctrine, as his prolific terminology testifies. This multi-directional terminology, acts as a nebula, and his works, strongly structured by the Quran, should be read like the book, like the Quran, through the modality of a tanjim, star-spangled diffusion. There is a lot of course, to say about this, but it's only lamahat, I would say. His approach of a topic to a topic always seemed to be in expansion. When you think that you have finished with an explanation or when in his vision of such term, such topic, no, it's never finished. Anyway, for me, because I don't know in a sufficient way Ibn Arabi's works. For instance, spiritual knowledge given by means of supra-reason is far from being qualified only in terms of unveiling or inspiration. He contrasts formal and rational perception with many other terms, opposite. Al-ilm al-ummi, the unliteral knowledge, or I would say rather, the supra-literal knowledge that the Prophet Muhammad received directly from God. Al-ilm al-laduni, the inspired knowledge of Al-Khidr, still receive up today from God. Al-ilm al-wahbi, the bestowed knowledge. Al-wujud, finding myself, so finding God. Al-basira, insight. Al-hikmah, wisdom, which is a prerogative of the prophets inherited by the saints, etc., etc. And the bearers of such faculties also receive various names. Apart from generic terms like people of God, Ahlullah, the knowers, Al-Arifun, and so on, we find other terms, many other terms, like the divine knower, Al-Alim, Al-Ilahi, people of witnessing and finding, Al-Shuhud wal-Wujud, Shuhud wujud, Wahdatu Shuhud, Wahdatu Wujud, the possessor of the kernels, Ulul Albab, those firmly rooted in knowledge, Rasikhun fil ilm, these last two extracted, as you know, from the Quran. There's something else. He usually provides more details, more nuances, or more insights than any other Sufi writer. For instance, with regards to the three levels of knowledge we have alluded to before, he distinguishes some subtle subdivisions that are hard to find elsewhere. In the same way, whereas he utterly condemns the rationalist, he gives a great value to reason in some context. So, the balance. The rational faculty, aql, or consideration, nazar, as I told before, is a divine gift and one of the fundamental powers of the human soul. But Ibn Arabi holds that rationalists have forgotten its original goal of aql. He also repeatedly affirms the positive role of reason in perceiving God's oneness, and that there is no need to prove the existence of God, as do the theologians, since a sound rational faculty perceive it innately. So no need to aim to prove God existence, because something, this fitra, this pure original faculty of perceiving a unity of God may be obtained by reason, because it's something very obvious. The ideal rational faculty is actually which accepts from God the knowledge of Him that He gives to it, and does not try to go beyond His own limitation. So, you are al-mutakallim, you as scholars, theologians, philosophers, don't try to go beyond your possibility, your mental possibilities. In other terms, the virtue of reason is to accept or receive, al-kabul, what is beyond it. So it's kind of taslim. The philosopher and the theologian have to submit themselves to this reality, which is beyond reason. It's difficult, of course, and we all know the trial of Fakhreddin Razi, wanted to experience Sufi experience, and he and he went to a sheikh of Tariqa al-Kubrawiya, and this sheikh put him in Khalwa, in perpetual retreat, and Fakhreddin, and he, you know, and we know that he was how to say, dressing very rich dressing habits. He couldn't afford that. He couldn't bear this experience because this sheikh makes him completely naked of any kind of knowledge. Would it be a religious knowledge? But it couldn't be. So Razi called the sheikh and told him, "No, give me my how to say, like the Buddhists say, how would I say, anyway, it seems that it constitutes my personality. It's a matter of identity." So Razi couldn't bear that, and he asked to have again all his religious sciences, dressing after dressing and so on, and he left. So the people of the kernels, ulul albab, are those who employ reason as it should be employed. In contrast to the people of the husk, al-kishr, external or peripheral perception of reality, was close to multi-dimensional reason. The problem is the opening to a multi-dimensional reason. And you have a contemporary philosopher in the West or elsewhere who speak about that. And they said that the drama of Western thought is that since European modernity, 3 or 4 centuries ago, we have lost the feeling and the knowledge of the perception of multidimensional levels of reality. We live only in a unidimensional reality. However, in contrast with his acknowledgement of reason, Ibn Arabi affirms that the knowledge given by Supra-reason is the sole and complete way to truth, to ultimate reality. It's the only all-encompassing, all-inclusive knowledge, he says, which embraces the entirety of knowable things. He links this knowledge to the one, al-khidr, received directly from God, as we said, al-ilm al-laduni, starting with grammatical considerations about the Quranic verse, Surah 18, the verse 65, in the context, of course, of the encounter between al-Khidr and Moses. He noticed that God applies to himself the plural pronoun us. And thus, Ibn Arabi concludes that God has brought together jam for al-Khidr, a synthetic, integral knowledge. And he says, knowledge on the manifest and the non-manifest, knowledge of the secret and the open, knowledge of judgment and wisdom, knowledge of reason and convention, etc. That is, a non-binary knowledge which gathers all aspects of life. Now, self-disclosure, tajalli or theophany, as an epistemological method. As we know, the topic of the self-disclosure, tajalli or theophany, is central to the doctrine of Ibn Arabi, to such an extent that Ibn Khaldun qualifies this doctrine by the school of tajalli, not by wahdat al-wujud or something else. As William Chittick points out, Ibn Arabi uses the term tajalli either in the context of ontology, al-wujud, or epistemology. In the latter, the question is, how does God make himself perceived or understood by his creatures. Elsewhere, Ibn Arabi methodically defines the self-disclosure of God as the light of unseen things that are unveiled to hearts. He clearly affirms that self-disclosure is the noblest way to gain sciences, and they are the sciences of tasting, ulum el-azwaq. Its possessors are obviously the prophets and some of the saints, I have seen before. So one should follow the authority of God through its self-disclosure, not the authority of our rational faculty, because we may fall in shirk khafi. And he says, when he discloses himself to that which is self-evident to your reason, you will necessarily find that you are supported by something which you cannot know through following the authority of this rational self-evidence. So it's, in French we speak of an aporie, but I didn't find the term in English. It's an aporie. For mental binary reason, there is no issue. There is no exit, no. Only by going beyond the stage of reason. It's a Sufi methodology, which is something strong and provocating. You won't find an horizontal issue. But you have to leave your how to say, or on your knowledge or your context of living, of your habits, of all your acquisitions to experience something else. Now the role of love versus reason. In the past, Ibn Arabi has been considered a mere grammarian of esotericism. Louis Massignon spoke with him. He didn't understand and he didn't appreciate Ibn Arabi and he writes somewhere that Ibn Arabi is mere a grammarian of esotericism, whose doctrine was only focused on metaphysical knowledge, something very pure but etheric. Now we know that he is also a great lover, and we actually see it in his epistemology. Reason constricts and binds reality by its very nature, and maintains creatures in a state of duality by distinguishing between God and ourselves. So true love of God will never be actualized until duality, separation, is broken. And here, Ibn Arabi asks reason to open itself to the subtlety of love. He says, he who stays with his reason in the state of his love will not be able to accept anything from the ruling authority of love. But if a person stays with his reason's acceptance, not its reflection, accepting from God that whereby he described himself, the ruling power of love will dominate over him in accordance with what his reason has accepted. So it's a royal trial for the mental thinkers, for us. Now, the virtues of paradox, joining the opposites. Human reason is based on, as I said, binary thought. It is yes or no, white versus black, good versus evil, health versus illness, etc. These are the landmarks by the means of which the dualistic nature of creatures, human but also animals and vegetables and so, can operate in this life. And this is how the jurists and theologians of Islam operate, halal, haram, and so and so. But fundamentally, duality is an illusion. For the real, al-haq, is one. So the ultimate goal of Islamic esotericism, of Sufism, is to go here and now beyond our common experience of duality, so as to return to the experience of oneness. Here and now. This is the basis of the esoteric perception of Tawhid, as we know. Tawhid al-Khas, as Al-Junayd and others said. In this process, human consciousness loses its landmarks to experience the ordeal, the trial of paradox. Because with paradox, two realities are true, but they are opposite. So how can human reason manage to escape from this peril? No? Ibn Arabi has an exemplary teaching in this field. Completeness of human consciousness can only be realized by living within the coincidential oppositorum, the union of opposites, Jam' ad-Dain. Of course, the early Sufis and Gnostic of other spiritual traditions have spoken about this coincidential oppositorum. And Ibn Arabi often quotes the Baghdadian Sufi Al-Kharraz from the 19th century, saying that he has known God through the fact that he brings opposites together. It's a well-known quotation of Al-Kharraz. Ibn Arabi draws from such statements his doctrine of a supra-logical perception of reality, a non-binary and all-inclusive method which plunges human reason into the great perplexity, Hayra, or we may say also a wonder without end. Let's quote some example of this method. He says, sometimes in the Futuhat, sometimes in the Fusus al-Hikam, every entity qualified by existence is it, not it. The whole cosmos is he, not he. The real manifest through form is he, not he. He is limited who is not limited, the seen who is not seen. Elsewhere, he says, in Fusus, he said, Adam is both the real, God, and the creator. Elsewhere, he says, you are not he, and yet you are he. Ibn Arabi throws this last phrase after having destroyed the duality that Islamic theology, in its various strands, maintains in the dialectics between transcendence, tanzih, and immanence, tashbih. We can say also, for tanzih, incomparability of God, and for tashbih, we may translate by similarity of God, which is creatures. He teaches that we can have access to God only by combining both. And he says somewhere in Al-Fusus, you determine him by transcendence. You limit him by immanence. If you assert both, you are right. But only if you assert both, you are right. According to Ibn Arabi, only people of unveiling, al-kashf, can experience this union of opposites. He says, the real describes himself by things with which rational proofs declare him transcendent or incomparable, munazzah. The people of unveiling who possess a divine power that is beyond the stage of reason recognize this, just as the common believers understand. Just as the common believers understand. They know why God accepts this description, even though he is transcendent through laysa kamislihi shay. Nothing is like him in the Quran. But, he continues, but this lies outside of what can be perceived by the rational faculty. So the common believer stands in the station of declaring similarity, tashbih. The people of unveiling declare both similarity and incomparability, and the rational thinkers declare incomparability alone. The Mu'tazili for instance. Hence, he says, hence God combines the two sides in his elect ones. It means the people of unveiling. Ibn Arabi uses in this respect the meaningful image of the possessor of two eyes, Dhul Aynayn, inspired by the Quran, Surah 90, verses 8 to 10. If you only see from one eye, that of intellectual discrimination, like the philosophers or the theologians, you will perceive God only in transcendence. But if you see from both eyes, you will obtain a balanced vision of transcendence and immanence. In other terms, one eye, he said, one eye sees being and the other perceives nothingness. Through the two eyes working together, man perceives that he himself and the cosmos are he, not he. Through the two eyes, reality appears in relief, beyond the fragmentation of duality. And it's the same for the physical vision. If you shut one eye, you won't have a perception in relief of reality. And in the metaphysical field, it's the same. If you are only in one way, maybe the right eye should be in Tawheed, in transcendence, but it's not the realization of sanctity in Islam. The realization of sanctity is to have both eyes. One eye, let's say the right eye in transcendence, in Tawheed, and the left eye in the multiplicity and the complexity of the world. It's, of course, the Mohammedan model. The different supra-reason method, I will finish soon. The different supra-reason methods Ibn Arabi uses are quite able to arouse dynamics and plasticity in human thought and in Islamic thought, of course, and to arrive at applications which are surely more of today than yesterday. There are several to think that Ibn Arabi's message is for today and tomorrow than it was for yesterday. Let's take the example of what he calls the third thing, a thalith, the third thing, or the third mode of existence. In discussing the term barzakh, he alludes to the third thing as an intermediary reality which is undefinable and which is capable of resolving the contradiction and rigidity of our binary thought. For it is, as he says, a relation which is always unique, uniting many fields where the same realities are seen from different perspectives. So you see that it's a quite a multidimensional perception of reality. The third thing evokes the theme of the included third. The included third, developed by the philosopher and logician Stéphane Lupesco. He was from east of Europe, but he lived in France. Stéphane Lupesco died in 1988. And this, in this system, Lupesco, and is well known now is in the West, he suggests a vision of the unity of existence. It doesn't speak of God, it's not its aim. But he said that the included third, and it's very mathematical, but it's very relevant, suggests a vision of the unity of existence and of its non-separability. وحدة الوجود. And continually receives an intuitive content in the world of Lupesco. Who was living in France, and the quite laxism of France. So, but he said these things besides. Human binary thought excluded the other, because it's an exclusivist way of thought. It's true of our force. It's I, myself, or you. So by nature, it excludes the other. And of course, it may result in dogmatism and horizontal ideology, not to say extremism. Whereas supra-logical experience opens up to the universal and to the all-embracing reality and to the Rahma. If you read the Islamist books or the Salafi books, you won't find the term Rahma, because Rahma is an all-encompassing reality. Thank you very much.
You spoke about super-reason. Now, if we think of the famous Turkish poet Yunus Emre, who was a disciple of Khwaja Ahmad al-Yasawi, Yunus Emre says in Turkish, and I will translate it into English, he said, ظاهر دطوت شريعتي باطن دطوت طريقتي تابولر حقيقتي. Exoterically catch the Sharia, esoterically catch the tariqa, which is the Sufi way, until you find the haqiqa, the truth. Now, for the Sufis, we know we have tajalliyat, futuh and kushuf. But the true masters of the Sharia say that if your tajalliyat, futuh and kushuf contradict the Sharia, drop them and stick to the Sharia. That is to keep the path pure. Does this coincide with Ibn Arabi's approach to Sufism or not?
Well, I will answer with my poor English, as I tell you. It's a matter of consciousness. Anyway, all Sufism and all initiatory paths are a matter of consciousness. Sharia is tajalli. And Ibn Arabi says, Sharia is haqiqah. But he had the level, how to say, he had the inner consciousness, he had the fath, to see within Sharia al-haqiqah. The problem is that, Islam, in most of times, not all, happily, became an ideology, so something horizontal, which has no more multidimensional, as I said, sides or levels. So everything in the world depends on your level on your consciousness. I mean, everything is here, as a divine presence is here. The Mohammedan presence is here. The Akbarian presence is here. But are we here? That's the problem. It's in ourselves. But we are not in ourselves. We are in the ego. But all the master say that. We have everything in it. Sharia is in it. Sharia is a common way, for salvation, to avoid health and to enter this idol, as said Arabia, which is paradise. So there are still two creatures, a paradise and health. So what do we want? But to experience as a God in ourselves requires a preparation. I don't know, because it may fall on you like that, it reclaims isti'adad, a preparation which is not conscious, most of the time, which is not conscious. And in this field, we have the model of the Ummi, and Ibn Arabi speaks about this Sheikh al-Ummi, which is one of the most elevated types of sense. Sorry, I was a bit outside your question, but so Sharia is a common. It's necessary. I need to have a skeleton, you know, to have muscles. That is Sharia, you know. But al-haqiqa in myself, where does it arise? Where is it? That's a problem of consciousness for human being in himself, for human being looking at outside. سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم. Of course, the matter of looking in outside ourselves. So looking at the Sharia reveals to us our haqiqa. So it's a mirror.
I don't. Thank you very much for that. I don't have a question per se, but maybe just to add to just this conversation about Sharia and haqiqa, and to reach the truth through Sharia. I think it's also important how people like Yunus Emre and Ibn Arabi have actually understood or defined Sharia, because I think there's a difference between their understanding of Sharia and the Sharia that is mostly and commonly understood nowadays as a definition. Because Said Nursi, for example, who is also a contemporary Muslim scholar in Turkey, defines Sharia as consisting 99% of ethics and ibadah and ubudiyya, and only 1% of law, as it is understood nowadays. Because nowadays, when we talk about Sharia, people mostly only think about, laws and haram and halal, and as if the Sharia consists of these aspects. Yeah.
But we are no more in Tawhid. We are in what I call consumerism halal. You know, okay, you are Muslim, so you can consume.
Consume?
Yes, consume. Okay, as long as it's halal, okay, you can consume. So we arrive at this point that one day I was in Indonesia for lectures, in French and in Arabic, and I wanted to buy a bottle of water. So I bought it. It was written on it halal. Water, not juice, no, water. It's incredible. The people, human beings, need to follow what God let open. Al-Mubah doesn't mean halal. Al-Mubah, it's indifferent to God. You may drink tea at 5 o'clock, like the English, or no problem. So al-mubah is very broad in Islamic law. But human beings, lawyers and so, yes. And the Prophet was saying to people, utrukuni ma taraktukum. Let me, as long as I let you, because for that God will be not obliged, but will reveal some prescriptions, or some and so on. So that's the nature of human being. Islam abrogated le clergé.
A researcher?
No, le clergé.
Oh, clergy, yeah.
Yeah. Islam abrogated the sacraments. But people need, to in France, for instance, we have the problem. It's maybe outside a bit, but not so much. Was a problem of the training of the imams, training the imams. So every ministry is busy with training of imams. And I always say when I encounter some responsible of politics and so, I tell them, in Islam, everybody, man and woman, is his own imam. So an imam should not be a kind of Islamic clerk. It's false. It's a big danger. You know, it's al-fitra. And all the realized people like Ibn Arabi and others thus saw Sharia as al-haqiqa, limpidly, you know, without adding all what added other people, you know. I don't know if I answered well to your question, but...
Thank you very much.